I don't want hockey fans coming after you in your hometown because people have totally found it.
Yes.
The athlete that has come up to you to say, I love your music, that you were really, impressed with or blown away. You mentioned Dan Marino in the television-only segment, the radio audience now.
Well, back in the 80s, there were a lot of, every time we'd go to a football town, football players would always come out. I became really good friends with Dwight Hicks. Who was a cornerback for the 49ers.
Sure.
And then Mean Joe Green and those guys from the Steelers used to come around, Carl Eller. And it was cool. I mean, we used to go to parties with those guys. I felt very safe, by the way.
Carl Eller and Mean Joe Green would definitely
that was,
make you safe.
Yeah, I never had to worry about much in those days. But it was, so they were the glory days of just hanging out with, but it's very similar to what, the young pop artists of today, the contemporary artists of today,
Sure.
They hang out with, the modern sports stars. It's always that intersection between music and sports.
And Johnny Mac, you've come across his path?
Well, I've known John for a long time. I was a very avid tennis player, and I lived very close to Mats Wilander in Connecticut for a while. And Mats was also a musician. And when they would do the U.S. Open, Mats would always have, after they resurfaced the courts at the U.S. Tennis Center, Mats would have his personal court resurfaced with the exact same material.
Okay.
So they could practice on the same surface. So he would always have a bunch of guys come over to the house, and he'd call me up and say, hey, I got a bunch of the guys coming over. You want to come over? And I go, yeah, of course, being a tennis fan. So I'd show up with my little tennis racket. And so one day I went over to Mats's house, and they were all having lunch and hanging out in the house. And he said, Mac's out on the court. He's
John McEnroe.
Yeah, he's stretching out. He said, why don't you go out and hit with him? I went, okay. So I went out there, and I'd known John, but, and he said, yeah, let's hit. So I'm out there. There's nobody around. It's just me and John McEnroe, and we're hitting. And I'm going, this is freaking amazing. I said, I wish someone could see this.
Yeah.
But the coolest part was, and I was an okay club player. I could hit the ball. But, when you compare yourself to a pro, it's a whole other thing. But he's going through his whole McEnroe thing. So he's hitting these shots, and if he hit a shot he didn't like, or he'd be like, and he'd be throwing, and I'm going, this can't be really happening. And that's a level of competitor that he was, and it was really cool. It was really cool. And I like I said, I wish someone could have seen it, but nobody did. So.
No, but it's a great story.
But it's not a lie. It's real.
It is not a lie. It is not fake news. And so there are two Johns out there. Oates was the one to say to McEnroe, "You can't be serious," because he was flipping out.
Yeah,
fantastic.
He yelled at me one time. We were playing a video game somewhere in New York City at somebody's house one time when video games just came out.
Yeah,
and he did the same thing in the video game. He actually yelled at me and said, "You're not trying, man." He goes, "You're not trying." I said. It was like weird, but you know what? That's what a competitive spirit's all about.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on radio stations across the country and audience.
If you like that video, be sure to download our app. Don't have any memory on your phone? Let's start to delete some of those slow-mo videos you have. And you know which ones I'm talking about.